What? Is that a child or monster? Why does he look so ugly?
I was hurt hearing him say that to my child. My husband was also hurt, but his mother and sister signaled us to be calm.
Down syndrome. But you have no right to say that about my son, Dad. You're being insensitive. But the child is ugly. He looks so hideous. You gave birth to a monster. Why didn't you let him die? He's going to be a liability. A monstrous liability.
I'd had enough of his insensitivity. I stood up and stormed out of the living room with my son. Hi there. My name's Sandra. 3 years ago, my husband and I got married. My husband, Jace, is a good man. I met him when I was working as a receptionist at a hotel. He used to visit there with his business associates. Being the friendly people that we are, it didn't take long before we became friends. On my free days, we would visit restaurants together. We both loved to find and explore new places. I was comfortable and happy with our friendship. A couple of months later, we started going out. We'd developed feelings for each other after being so close. Jace never failed to make me happy during our dating period. He helped me get a better job with a better pay. Everything was going smoothly. Surprisingly, barely 3 months after we began dating, Jace proposed marriage to me. I couldn't believe it. I cried so much out of happiness. After our engagement, he took me to see his family. According to him, his dad had abandoned them when he was only a child, so he barely knew him. Of course, I didn't mind. When we reached his family's house, I was received lovingly. He had one sibling who I absolutely adore. She and his mother made me feel so loved and accepted. I couldn't be happier with how things were going. We soon got married. Our marriage was a low-key one since we both wanted it that way. I was an orphan, so I didn't have many people in attendance, aside from my friends at work and a few extended families. Nevertheless, I enjoyed my wedding. After the wedding ceremony, Jace and I began our married life in the mansion he bought. Jace had a great job, so money was never a problem for us. I got a call one day, about 4 months after our wedding. It was an unsaved number, so I was skeptical about picking it up. However, I was forced to, when the number continuously kept calling me.
Hello. Am I speaking to Sandra?
Yes. Who are you? I was shocked when the caller revealed himself as Jace's father. Even more, he was crying. He asked to meet me up at a restaurant close to our house and said he had a lot of things to tell me and also needed my help. I didn't know whether to believe the stranger. I would have spoken to Jace about it, but the man had begged me not to. The next day, after leaving my workplace, I headed to the restaurant to meet the man. Once I saw him, I immediately knew he was truly Jace's father. They looked so much alike. I greeted him and sat down. We began talking, and he explained that he was sorry about leaving his family.
I regret my decision, child. I wish I could turn back the hands of time. My wife refuses to see me, and I know the kids hate me too. Please help me.
I didn't know what to do. I couldn't tell if it would be a good idea to help him. However, when the man began crying, I couldn't bring myself to refuse. I agreed to help him. The plan was to find a way to gather my husband and his family at their family house, then bring his father to them. I knew Jace would be mad at me for keeping him in the dark, but the man was my father-in-law. Also, I thought it was good since he'd accepted his mistake and was willing to correct it. 2 weeks later, I was finally able to gather us all at Jace's family house. After dinner, I announced that I'd brought someone with me. That was after Jace's father texted to inform me that he was outside the house. I immediately replied and asked him to come in and show himself to the curious people. Once he entered, the whole place fell into silence. Jace's mother, a few seconds later, yelled at him to get out of her house, but the man quickly went on his knees. I did the same and begged for him.
How dare you go to my wife? After all you did, I can't believe you had the boldness to show yourself to us.
His father continued begging and crying. I explained everything the man told me, and it seemed to calm down. Once everyone was calm, Jace's mother asked her husband to leave, as she had to think. The man didn't argue. He stood up and left. Jace's mother broke in a loud sob as her kids went to console her. I also did the same. Afterward, we had a talk. I was able to convince her to forgive her husband as the man seemed truly sorry. I pleaded with my husband and his sister too. Eventually, they agreed to meet him again. I was so happy to have made their family complete again. The next time he saw them, he apologized over and over again. The family hugged each other happily. They decided to start afresh and let the past be buried. I did ask him how he got to know me, and I discovered that he'd been watching the family for long, but was too afraid to approach them. Seeing the love they had for me encouraged him to approach me. 3 months after the reunion, I got pregnant with our first child. Jace was elated. He couldn't stop thanking me and smiling. Family and friends also congratulated us after we shared the news with them. We were all happy. I had to stop my job because my husband didn't want his pregnant wife going through even the slightest stress. I wasn't alone. Whenever Jace was away, his sister would spend time with me. And when his sister wasn't available, his mother was there. We were all happy. Well, that happiness didn't last long. My baby was born with Down syndrome. Strangely, the doctors hadn't noticed at birth and even after birth. When I started to sense his weird behaviors and features around the time he was 4 months old, I took him to the doctor and he was diagnosed. It didn't make me love my son any less, nor did his father. We loved our son and were ready to give him whatever care he needed. It would have been good if my father-in-law was the same. He didn't see or know about my son's condition until the family visited us when my son was 6 months old.
What? Is that a child or monster? Why does he look so ugly?
I was hurt hearing him say that to my child. My husband was also hurt, but his mother and sister signaled us to be calm.
You shouldn't say that about a child. He probably has Down syndrome, according to what I see. You shouldn't speak that way, no matter what.
Down syndrome. But you have no right to say that about my son, Dad. You're being insensitive. But the child is ugly. He looks so hideous. You gave birth to a monster. Why didn't you let him die? He's going to be a liability. A monstrous liability.
I'd had enough of his insensitivity. I stood up and stormed out of the living room with my son. I did hear their loud voices from my room, and I knew they were arguing. Before they left, my mother-in-law and her daughter came into my room and apologized for my father-in-law's behavior. It was so sad that a day I'd planned to be filled with happiness turned out worst. We continued taking care of our son. I refused to allow my father-in-law anywhere close to him. I met up with my mother-in-law and her daughter a few times, but never him. The women loved my son so much, regardless of his issue, and that was all that mattered. On my son's first birthday, we threw a party. It wasn't so big, but big enough to accommodate our families and friends. When the day finally came, my father-in-law ruined it. I was skeptical about inviting him, but I didn't want to be disrespectful by inviting his wife and daughter and not him. Things were going smoothly at the party until my father-in-law requested to give a speech. I smiled, thinking he was going to give an apology speech publicly, but I was wrong. My father-in-law took the mic and began to mock my child. He called him a monster, a sick child, among other vile titles. I burst into tears on my seat. Worst of all, he was laughing while doing that.
If he had Down syndrome and was good-looking, he could have been manageable. But he's as ugly as his mother. I'm sure she agreed to marry my son because she couldn't afford to marry a person as ugly as her.
I was shocked. I had zero idea what suddenly got into him. I couldn't place my hands on a reason he would be doing that to my son and I. Everyone was probably as shocked as me because they remained rooted to their seats with straight faces. Once he was done, he got off the stage with a proud smile and went to his seat. I was about to stand up and leave with my son when my sister-in-law stood up and began walking to the stage. I wondered what she was going to say.
Firstly, you're nothing but an ungrateful, insensitive, bloody fool. You abandoned us for over 15 years. We've hated you all our lives. If it weren't for Sandra, you wouldn't have been with us. Who the hell do you think you are to talk about her son like that? My first nephew?
My tears flowed more as my sister-in-law poured insults on him. Once she was done, a friend of Jace got on the stage.
You're a complete disgrace to all fathers out there. You don't deserve to be called a father.
More people came up on stage and gave him a piece of their minds. I could see the look of guilt in his eyes, seeing that no one accepted him. He tried to approach me with pleading eyes, but my husband stopped him.
I will never let you near them. I should have never allowed you back into our lives.
You've always been an idiot. She made us forgive, and I tried to believe you've changed, but you're still just the stupid man I knew.
I consider myself fatherless from now on. You're evil.
We even accommodate your broke self. Now go back to the house, pack your things, and get out of our lives. If you ever try to come back, I'll report you to the police.
Please, please forgive me. I'll stop it. I'll change, please.
He begged desperately, but his family weren't hearing any of it. Some of our friends grabbed him and threw him out of the party. When we got home and met him there, Jace beat him up so badly that the man escaped by running away without his luggage. It was quite a funny scene. I thank the family for standing up for my son and I.
You've become my child, and that's my grandson. I won't allow anyone make you both uncomfortable.
You've been good to us, and Down syndrome doesn't make my nephew a monster. We all love him, and we'll protect him.
I don't regret beating him up. He deserves it for messing with my wife and son.
I felt happy and grateful. And as for my father-in-law, he tried to come back for his things, but his daughter gave him another round of beating. That was enough to send him out of our lives forever. Since then, we haven't heard from him. We heard he later got married to a wife who constantly beats him, and unfortunately for them, they had a child with Down syndrome, and Jace's father is depressed. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below saying I subscribed, and we will try our best to reply to your comment.